Hi, my name is Dr. Darren Renzi, and this is Teach Talks from the Office of Transformational Learning. Teach Talks is a series of interviews that will highlight the brilliant instructional practices being used here at Smith, and also help new and existing faculty learn more about teaching, learning, and how to thrive in higher education. Welcome, Professor Basu.
Thank you, Darren.
Thank you for joining us for Teach Talks.
I feel honored to be invited.
I'm excited. You were our very first person.
Wow.
So what everybody always wants to know is a great teaching experience that you've had here at Smith.
So I have a few. As you can imagine, I've been teaching at Smith for 12 years, but my teaching experience is over 30 years now. I have this accounting teaching scholars program where we select about 12 or 13 of our top performing accounting majors every year. And I work with them very closely, and my role in working with them is to help them become better teachers. So they work as teaching assistants in our classes. So I have very good working relationship with them. So I don't know if there is one particular instance. Of course, I have had some very, very successful teaching assistants who have actually, I think of that as an accomplishment on my part. I have motivated them to go and pursue teaching as a career. So I've had a few of them who have gone on to become PhDs and have become professors now, which to me I think is very gratifying.
Yeah, I think that's exceptional. As someone who's sort of earlier in my teaching career, I'm excited for that next stage when people report back what they've done, what they've become.
Right. So that to me is very memorable.
So with all great experiences, there's the other side of it.
Sure.
So can you share an experience that you had that you took as a learning opportunity, but that in the moment was perhaps a difficult, tricky, or maybe even catastrophic teaching scenario for you?
So let me give you a little bit of background. I've been teaching for 30 years, but I never taken a class on how to teach. So I've never had a formal education, formal training on how to become a better teacher. So almost everything I've learned about teaching is by making mistakes. And I'm very honest to admit that. If you ask me to give one example of a disastrous moment, I'll go back to when I started teaching. This is 30 years ago, and it was my first or second year, and I was teaching an auditing class, and a student asked me a question which was not part of the topic that I had prepared for that class. I really wasn't sure of the answer, but I also was new, and I was not confident enough to say that, no, I don't know. So I kind of made up an answer, which was all wrong. So I did, say this is the audit risk model. And then I went back to my office and I realized what I had done. And I cannot even explain to you how embarrassed I felt. So, but it was a learning moment. So what I did was the next day I went and I explained to the class, this question was asked and I explained to you the audit risk model, but that's not really how it works. This is the real. And then I also learned, and what was the learning moment is, if you're asked a question, there is no shame in saying, I don't know. So, and this happens particularly in graduate classes where students ask questions for which I do not have a ready answer, but I always tell them, that's a very good question. I really don't know the answer, but I'll try to look it up and get back to you. So, learning moment.
Absolutely, and I think that's so important. So even when I work with the new faculty, I often tell them one of the most important things for them to do is to practice saying, I don't know out loud. I think sometimes in academia, we're not very used to that.
We are not used to that, and we feel embarrassed, particularly in front of our students,
I agree, and I think part of it is the confidence to say, great question.
Exactly.
I'll reflect and I can look it up for you, find out for you.
So, but, I was new, I was, starting out, so I didn't want to say I don't know.
Right, it's natural also.
Yep.
So for the newer faculty, people who are watching you thinking, how am I going to get there? What do you think is the best piece of teaching advice that you would pass on to them?
My teaching advice is something that I have tried to follow is I have tried to maintain high standards. And I have always believed that students will always come up to your level of expectation, as long as they are not, totally unrealistic. But I have tried not to lower my expectations and lower my standards. So I expect that students will meet my high standards. I usually go to my first class and tell them that the fact that you are in my class says that you are capable of performing well in my class. I will provide all the resources, but you also have to meet me halfway. And you have to take responsibility for your learning. In my experience, if you start lowering your expectations and standards, it's a downward spiral.
So it's also supported by the research, right? Having
right.
very clear expectations in the classroom
Right.
means students know how to succeed in your classroom, and then you have this additional great layer of providing all of this encouragement to get them there. And so if there was one last thing that you would leave as a note about teaching, your experience at Smith, something that you would pass on to someone who wants to get where you've already gone to, wants to achieve what you have achieved in teaching?
So one recommendation I would say is, a very common proverb, a stitch in time saves nine. So if you're a new professor, if you're teaching a new class, please spend as much time as you can on making up your policies, making up your syllabus, and try to kind of anticipate what are some of the challenges that you might have. And if you don't have a policy in place, you are going to run into the situation that you are having different standards for different students, which I think is not the best idea. So put in the time, when you're putting together your course, making up the syllabus, and try to anticipate. Of course, I've been teaching for 30 years. I still run into situations which I have not seen before. But I try to anticipate as much as I can and have policies in place to deal with those situations.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for being here and sharing your advice. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. I feel honored. Thank you.